It's no wonder that rock and roll is his anthem. What's more rock and roll than resistance, camaraderie, and fighting for what you love?
Freedom, love, these are the things that you have to fight for. And these are actually one of those things that we believe in and we fight for them.
We last talked to Serhiy toward the end of last year. He'd just gotten married, and he was heading back to the front right after his honeymoon. Which means now, when he's out there in the mud and the cold and the noise, there's one more person for him to fight for. One more tie back to the life he's protecting. Deciding to take matters into your own hands is more than just a clever fix. It's an act of hope. When systems fail, people don't. We improvise, we connect, we keep the signal alive however we can. I'm Dina Temple-Reston, and you've been listening to Click Here. Click Here is a production of Recorded Future News and PRX. Today's show was written and produced by Megan Dietrich, Sean Powers, Erica Gaida, and Zach Hirsch. It was edited by Karen Duffin and Lou Olkowski, and fact-checked by Darren Ankrum. Original music is by Ben Livingston, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Our staff writer is Lucas Riley, and our illustrator is Megan Goff. Jesse Neiswanger and Jake Cook are our sound designers and engineers. Find us on X or Facebook at Click Here Show, or leave us a voice message at 661-5CH-TALK. Sometimes we'll turn those moments into reporting, sometimes into a conversation, and sometimes into a future story you'll hear on this show. I'm Dina Temple-Reston, and thanks for listening.
Support comes from the St. Paul Academy and Summit School, shaping the minds and the hearts of the people who will change the world. The application deadline is February 1st. More information at spa.edu.
You're listening to NPR News, 91.1 FM KNOW, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Stay curious, stay connected. I'm Jacob Alloy in the Twin Cities. Coming up next is some special coverage. We'll be preempting our usual airing of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me this afternoon at 1 p.m. as we await a press conference from Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison. My colleagues Clay Masters and Catherine Richard will anchor that special coverage. This, of course, comes in the wake of the killing of Alex Pretti, a 37-year-old who was fatally shot by a federal agent yesterday morning in Minneapolis. Once again, we will begin that special coverage here shortly on NPR News. This is NPR News.
This is live special coverage on NPR News. I'm Clay Masters. We're awaiting a press conference with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison. This is part of our ongoing coverage of the fatal killing of 37-year-old Alex Pretti. A federal judge has granted a temporary restraining order barring federal officials from destroying or altering evidence related to Saturday's fatal shooting. This is in response to a lawsuit filed last night by the Hennepin County Attorney's Office and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. We anticipate that the governor and the attorney general will talk about this. I'm in studio now with NPR News correspondent Catherine Richard. We'll bring you that press conference live when it starts and then have some analysis. This is NPR News, and you're listening to live special coverage. We're going to go to headlines here in just a moment.
For NPR News in the Twin Cities, I'm Kelly Blyer. Vigils, protests, and memorials sprung up around the Twin Cities last night following the shooting of Alex Pretti. Pretti was a 37-year-old nurse who was shot and killed by federal agents in Minneapolis. A protest in Whittier Park in Minneapolis drew thousands of people. An attendee named Allie, she didn't want her last name aired for fear of retribution, came to the protest alone. She said the day felt too familiar to when Renee Macklin Good was shot and killed earlier this month.
Sadly, not shocked. That's kind of the scary part, is watching the video of it happen. It was kind of numbing because we've been here, we've done this, and yeah, I would say just oddly numb.
Democratic city, state, and federal officials have called on the Trump administration to remove federal agents from the state. Minnesota activist and rapper Nur-D was detained by federal agents yesterday morning. It happened in South Minneapolis following the killing of Alex Pretti. The musician, whose legal name is Matt Allen, is seen being dragged to the ground by federal agents on social media videos. He is now home safe and posted on social media, quote, "If ICE can openly murder people in the streets with impunity, there is no justice." Allen is known for tackling social justice issues in his music. In other news, the 22nd Arrowhead Ultra 135 begins tomorrow morning for runners, bikers, and skiers. The course follows a snowmobile trail from International Falls south to Tower, and it can take up to 2 days to complete. Ken Krieger is the race director. He says early morning temperatures will be a challenge, but they'll balance out.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday during the day, kind of 0 degrees plus or minus, say 10 degrees, which is actually almost perfect for racers. Keeps the trail hard, and it keeps them from sweating too bad.
Krieger says less than half of the competitors who choose to run the race actually finish. In sports, the Florida Panthers defeated the Minnesota Wild last night 4-3. The Frost have a home game against the New York Sirens beginning at 2. And the Timberwolves will host the Golden State Warriors at the Target Center at 4:30. It's a game that was to be played yesterday but was postponed until today due to the fatal shooting. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. Today I'm joined by Attorney General Ellison, Public Safety Commissioner Bob Jacobson, Minnesota Department of Corrections Commissioner Paul Snell. Thanks everybody for joining us again. We're now about 24 hours from the killing of Alex. And during that time of everything that's happened, I hope everyone's taking away a picture of a life of generosity, service-oriented, and his life's coming into clearer focus. I had the privilege of talking with Michael and Susan, Alex's parents, yesterday, and the heartache in the hours after your son's murdered in front of the world is one thing, but what stood out to me was a parent's desire and their passion to make sure that the story of Alex was told. Someone who went to work to care for veterans, someone who was a valued coworker, someone who relished and lived in this state in a big way, whether it was outdoor activities or being down there on the street as a First Amendment witness to what ICE is doing to this state. So once again, to Michael and Susan, when I talk to these parents, it's always in deep confidential conversation. In this one, though, Michael was very clear to me. He said, don't let them forget Alex's story. The world knows how he died. He died at the hands of ICE agents on the streets of Minneapolis. They want us to make sure we said how he lived. So to Michael and Susan, our deepest sympathies, but you have my commitment to continue to tell that story. So now we've got 2 Minnesotans dead. We had time to start telling Renee's story of a poet and a mother and a bright spirit, and now we're telling Alex's story. So my question is, what's the plan, Donald Trump? What is the plan? What do we need to do to get these federal agents out of our state? You thought fear, violence, and chaos is what you wanted from us, and you clearly underestimated the people of this state and nation. We are tired, but we're resolved. We're peaceful, but we'll never forget. We're angry, but we won't give up hope. And above all else, we are clearly unified. If it was the intention of Donald Trump to make an example of Minnesota, then I'm damn proud of the example that the world's seeing. We believe in law and order in this state. We believe in peace. And we believe that Donald Trump needs to pull these 3,000 untrained agents out of Minnesota before they kill another person. And we're up here telling another story of a Minnesotan just trying to live their life without the interference. To Americans who are watching this right now, and I don't know, maybe you're watching it with curiosity, bewilderment, horror, scorn, or sympathy. I've got a question for all of you. What side do you want to be on? The side of an all-powerful federal government that can kill, injure, menace, and kidnap its citizens off the streets? Or on the side of a nurse at the VA hospital who died bearing witness to such government? Or the side of a mother whose last words were, "I'm not mad at you"? The side of tens of thousands of peaceful citizens who showed up to march when the wind chill was 40 below because they love this state and they love this country. You're allowed to decide at any point that you're not with this anymore. If you voted for this administration, heck, even if you thought Operation Metro Surge was a good idea, sounded like the thing to do a month ago, you're still allowed to look at what's happening here in Minnesota and say, this isn't what I voted for and this isn't what I want. I ask you not to stand by idly. Speak out, share what you're seeing, and urge others to put politics aside. We're no longer having a political debate, we're having a moral debate. We all want secure borders and immigration enforcement that prioritizes criminals. And I want to thank the press, especially the local press, who has done a deep dive to show that's exactly what Minnesota does. But what you're seeing is not common sense, lawful, or humane enforcement. That's not what this occupation is about. Let me say our conversation should not be about, and I know we get asked of what we're doing on there, how many state patrol or police or National Guard I can put on the street. This isn't about how many people I can put on the street. It's about how many of these people, these ICE agents and whoever else was thrown into this unholy mess, how many Donald Trump can get out of here. Minnesotans, you've won the hearts and minds of people across this country, and you've done it through your peaceful, resolved defense of your neighbors and the Constitution. So once again, Minnesotans, stay peaceful, stay safe. Change is coming and we can feel it. But this fight still goes on. And I'm just glad today to be joined in person because it's someone who's been at the side of Minnesotans throughout this and through every other thing we've gone through over the last 7 years. Someone who we describe as the people's lawyer, someone who is fighting this battle for the Constitution, for the safety of Minnesotans in courts every single day. I want to give this over to Attorney General Keith Ellison to talk a little bit about what's going on with the state on some of the lawsuits and what our expectations are in the coming days. Attorney General.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Walz, thank you for your excellent leadership during this very, very difficult time, this unprecedented time, Governor, because quite honestly, there's never been a deployment of immigration agents this size in the history of the United States. There have been times in American history where they've deported a lot of people, but a concentrated deployment of ICE agents in one state in one period of time is unprecedented. And therefore, there's no playbook. And therefore, nobody knows exactly how to deal with this situation, but it is unique and particularly puzzling given that Minnesota does not have the highest immigration in the United States, given that Minnesota has a very, very professional community of law enforcement professionals who are taking care of the safety of our state, given the fact that the Department of Corrections, pursuant to state law, hands over people who ICE is looking for and they have proper paperwork for. Given all of that, this is a very curious situation and would reasonably lead someone to ask why. So let me talk about Alex Pretti. Alex Pretti was a nurse at the VA. I happen to have a son who's 31 years old who spent 5 years in the United States military as a combat medic. But toward the end of his deployment and the end of his service, he wanted to go into nursing, and so he did. And ended up getting an RN degree and works in the healthcare system here in Minnesota. And when he was at work today and last night, he said, look, my colleagues were crying and in tears, and they took this hit to one of their own very personally. And he said, I did too. He said, I didn't I didn't find myself shedding tears, but I could have, because I just was brokenhearted, because I know the service that he and the love and compassion he puts into taking care of the people he took care of at the VA. An intensive care nurse, a kind, compassionate person to friend and family, described by coworkers as the first person who would jump in to help. He was our neighbor, and he should still be with us right now. So let me just note that Superintendent Drew Evans of the BCA, another exemplary professional in our state, he is the BCA is the state's investigative agency, and it is their job to investigate crime. They have a specialized unit to investigate the use of force cases. They arrived on site after the shooting and were refused access. They then secured a judicial warrant, a warrant signed by a judge, which has never been needed before, and were still refused access. This is uncharted territory. Now, friends, this comes at the tail end of other offenses, like a shooting in North Minneapolis and another homicide in South Minneapolis, Renee Nicole Good, where they also were denied access to the scene, and investigators are, to this moment, still being denied access to the investigative file. This is not a rash decision for us to go to court and to seek a temporary restraining order from a judge to preserve evidence and prevent the destruction of evidence. I don't care if you're conservative, liberal, or whatever, but you should at least be in favor of conserving evidence in a homicide. And to have to go get an order from a judge to preserve that evidence is extraordinary and should alarm everyone who believes in equal justice under the law and who believes that every person, no matter how this case ultimately is resolved, deserves to have their case investigated to get to the truth of what happened. This is an extraordinary moment in an unprecedented time, and we're doing all we can to step up to that moment. My office represents the BCA and joined the Hennepin County Attorney's Office in a lawsuit last night, as you know, and we moved to prevent the destruction and or tampering with evidence related to Alex Pretti's shooting. And this includes any evidence the federal agents took from the scene of the shooting, preventing the state authorities from inspecting it. We've never had to do anything like this before. Never before. We filed that motion last night and for a temporary restraining order asking the court to take immediate action to preserve the evidence. And last night, within 2 hours of the filing, a judge granted the motion. The Department of Homeland Security and the federal government are now enjoined from destroying or altering evidence related to yesterday's shooting. The fact that anyone would ever think that an agent of the federal government might even think about doing such a thing was completely unforeseeable only a few weeks ago. Yeah. But now, this is what we have to do. As we said in our filing last night, the irreparable harm we would suffer if the federal government were allowed to destroy evidence is so weighty that any harm to the federal government does not even budge the scales in a court balancing of the scales. It's imperative that we preserve as much evidence as possible so that the state investigators are allowed to access the evidence to ensure a fair, thorough investigation. And I will say, I've heard not one single law enforcement or investigative agent in the state of Minnesota say that they won't share information with the federal government. I've heard quite the opposite from the federal government. Now, Operation Metro Surge. As I noted when I started, this appears to be the largest single deployment or surge of immigration agents in the history of the country. And as a result, tremendous damage has been inflicted upon our state. We've had 2 killings within 2 weeks and an additional non-lethal shooting. We've had countless numbers of people who have been stopped and had the demand for their papers, to have to show their papers in America. We've had door-to-door knocks where people have their homes barged into without cause of right. And we've had stores have to shutter, students not going to school. We've had reduction in employees going to their job sites. We've had jobs being, little markets being shut down, restaurants being interfered with. We've had a countless number of harms. And so we took the action of suing the federal government over Operation Metro Surge. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to be in federal court with my team arguing for a restraining order against Operation Metro Surge. I filed this case almost 2 weeks ago, and this will be our first hearing. The lawsuit we filed is one that is caused by the unprecedented nature of this surge. It is a novel abuse of the Constitution that we're looking at right now. No one can remember a time when we've seen something like this, when a state can marshal facts to show that our targeting is not based on excessive amounts of undocumented immigrants or anything like that, but we're targeted because of politics, which violates our First Amendment rights. The 10th Amendment, which we are entitled as a state to equal sovereignty, and we have been denied that. The federal government is literally commandeering and coercing the state of Minnesota to bend to its will, which is the prerogative of the people of the state of Minnesota. Let me remind everybody, let me take everybody back to 8th grade civics. The states predate the United States and came into the Union preserving their rights as states to be the states that the citizens of those states want them to be within a constitutional framework. It is at the fundamental, it is in the DNA of American history that the federal government cannot trample over the prerogatives of the state. And that is exactly what is happening here, and that is exactly why we're going to court. This surge has drained local law enforcement time and resources. Jacob Fry, if he were here, could tell you that they've spent north of $2 million on overtime responding to ICE. They've damaged our economy, hurt our education system, and terrorized community members. And it must stop, and tomorrow is a big step in that direction. Now, as I noted a moment ago, people will ask, well, why Minnesota? I'll say this. Minnesota is dealing with targeted oppression from the federal government because of who we are and who we value. Minnesota is a place where we welcome the stranger. We have a number of nonprofits that focus on refugee resettlement in Minnesota. Minnesota is a place where we take care of the vulnerable among us. We're a state that just passed paid family leave. We're a state that believes in feeding our kids who are in school, and we're a state that believes that Minnesota is a great place to live for everyone, no matter where you were born. Of course, we obey all laws, but we still believe that immigration is not a sin. They're coming after our state, in my view, because of what we stand for, because we voted 3 times in favor of somebody not Donald Trump, which he has publicly said he resents deeply and believes is not even true. I can tell you it's not about fraud. Because if he sent people who understand forensic accounting, we'd be having a different conversation. But he's sending armed, masked men. This is a pretext, and it's not supported by the facts at all, which has brought us to court challenging the justification that the president has offered. For those watching around the country, I would submit to you that just as Portland and Chicago and LA were precursors to Minneapolis, Minneapolis is a precursor to a whole lot of other places that they have their eye on right here, right now, including Maine and several other states. If we don't stop this behavior here, it will only expand, and it won't be good for anyone in our country. Minnesota is staying strong, and I want to join Governor Walz in my just pride in being a Minnesotan. No football game victory could ever make me feel as good about our state as I do about people standing up, helping their neighbors, engaging in mutual aid, giving each other rides different places, making sure that there's enough groceries, protesting, using their First Amendment rights. This state has a lot of spirit, and Minnesota Nice is a real thing. I wasn't fortunate enough to be born in Minnesota. I was born and grew up in Michigan, and I can tell you that this state has a lot of nice people. It really does. And a lot of people who believe in taking care of their neighbor and welcoming the stranger, and as we see right now, resisting tyranny. So I just want to say that as the courage of protesters and others who are helping their neighbors is so evident on the streets of this great state of ours, we at the Attorney General's office and in Minnesota state government can do no less than match the courage you have already shown. And we will not back down, we won't blink, we won't bow. We will stand firmly on our constitutional rights and in favor of Minnesotans. We will do that in the ballot box, at the courts. We will do that in the streets in a peaceful, legal, First Amendment protected way. And we will do it in a multitude of ways. But one thing we will not do is we will not back down and we will not bend. And so let me wrap up by saying this. We will never forget Alex Pretti. We will never forget Renee Nicole Good. And we will never forget any of the Minnesotans who have suffered so unjustifiably in this time. Minnesota is a great place. That is why I believe we've been targeted. But it's not going to work. And we'll be in court tomorrow arguing for the rights of every Minnesotan to stand up and be the generous, courageous people that we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General. We'll be glad to take some questions, folks. Tom?
Walz, you got a letter from Attorney General Pam Bondi making several demands, I guess you would call them, regarding sanctuary cities, regarding fraud and voter rolls. Your response to that, is there anything you can do to meet the Trump administration, at least part of the way, to try to turn this temperature down?
Well, first of all, it's not a serious attempt, and the Attorney General's in that. And I would thank the local folks and Commissioner Snell. Thank you to you and your team over there. In that letter, they talked about, you need to hand people over who are in your jails. They're taking credit for people that we've had in jail for a long time. We always hand them over, and the Commissioner very clearly. So they're lying. They're lying. This has nothing to do with fraud. As the Attorney General said, they're not sending us forensic accountants. And these are things that have been we're dealing with now and have been for quite some time. So look, it's not a serious attempt to get at this. The way to fix this is get these folks out of here. We've continued to work with them. They asked us for these numbers. We provided them. We continue to show, and they're not serious. And look, I think everybody understands what the last request was, totally unrelated to anything on the voter files. This is, again, as the Attorney General said, Donald Trump telling everybody that the election was rigged, who started all this nightmare for America. Has nothing to do with it. And I would just give a pro tip to the Attorney General. There's 2 million documents in the Epstein files we're still waiting on. Go ahead and work on those.
Governor Walz, this is for you or the Attorney General. If they're not honoring judicial warrants, how can you trust that they're going to be honoring this temporary restraining order?
Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked it because, since Trump 2 began, and even including Trump 1, we filed a lot of lawsuits. We're north of 50 now. And they've been on everything from birthright citizenship to SNAP to things like the National Institute of Health to EV to all kinds of things. And they've been complying with the orders. Now, I will say the foot drag, we've had to threaten them with contempt a few times. And I'm not saying that the compliance has been good. I am saying that open defiance of court orders is not something that we've experienced. And so I have every reason to believe that they will obey the court order. Now, if they don't, we have recourse, and we'll pursue that recourse. On a deeper level, your question, I would simply say this. Just because they may not do the right thing does not absolve us of the responsibility of doing the right thing. Yeah. We're going to seek legal recourse, and if they disobey a court order, then that's on them. But we're going to seek those orders, and we're going to insist that they be followed.
Local sheriffs have said they lack the legal authority to honor ICE detainers, and that's something that Attorney General Ellison has said as well. They lack the authority under Minnesota law. Is that an authority you could just give them? Could you pass a law, not prisons, but county sheriffs and jails?
So really, the key issue here is I think most sheriffs in the state do fully honor ICE detainers and provide notification. The issue becomes when they have a lawful reason to be released, bail, released by judicial order. The jail cannot hold that person beyond that point in time. That's the fundamental issue. There is not a lack of cooperation. There is just some legal boundaries. We've had some conversations with ICE about this. We think that there may be some things that could be worked out, but I don't think that's the core issue that we're really dealing with here.
Can I simply say that it puts Minnesota in a very difficult position, because if such a person were held beyond a period of time when the state court has the authority to hold them, then the state court is exposing itself to liability. So ICE just has to show up and do its job.
That's the fundamental question here. And that's the fundamental argument they keep making. We cooperate. We don't do their job. You saw it this week with rural, conservative Cottonwood County. Sheriff had someone, told them this person's time is done. We can't just hold them indefinitely. It's against the law. So we're going to release this guy. Come and get him. They're too busy up here doing what they did yesterday to go pick up someone who actually should be removed from this country. And I don't know how many times they try and confuse the people across this country. It's their job to do immigrations and customs enforcement. It's law enforcement's job to do law enforcement in Minnesota. They are not doing immigration enforcement, saying we should be doing that, while they're apparently now trying to do extrajudicial law enforcement on our streets. So this is a red herring. It's untrue. The Attorney General of the United States put falsehoods into a letter she sends to me that we are doing what's asked of us, but we're not going to do your job for you. We have other things we need to do.
Attorney General, how concerned are you, getting back to the evidence in the Pretti
case,
that you might not get access to his camera footage and that you might not get to the bottom of whether he was carrying an ID or not?
I am deeply concerned about the preservation of evidence, which is why we went to court last night. But I have faith in Judge Tonsrud's order that it will be followed, and I can tell you that Minnesota officials are going to do everything we can to get to the truth. And again, as a prosecutor, I am not allowed to say what the final outcome is going to be. We have to get the evidence and find out. But if you're asking me, Tom, if I'm concerned, you better believe I am concerned. But look, they've got the order. Now they're going to defy the court if they don't follow it.
As a quick follow, you met with Vice President Vance when he was in town on Thursday, I understand.
I did.
Can you tell us about what the tenor of that meeting was? His goal was to turn down the temperature. 2 days later, there was the shooting.
Well, I guess it didn't work, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. Governor Walz and I were in Congress together for 12 years before both of us went to go serve in the state government. We're used to talking to these folks. Why not see if there's something that can be arrived at? I can tell you that it was a polite meeting. I can also tell you that I walked out of there thinking that we probably weren't going to get anywhere. Because quite honestly, a few hours late, not even hours, a few minutes later, he just got up there and just articulated the same talking points he made to me in the meeting. I tried to correct him. He didn't want to hear that. And so I'm like, well, welcome to Minnesota. Thank you very much. You both of us have things to do. So see you later. And I left. It was cordial enough, but it was not fruitful. But look, I just think that, and I'm sure the governor agrees. If you can try to talk to somebody sensibly, we do. But that one didn't get where we had hoped.
Let's do one more from the end. Lauren Gurley here from the Washington Post. Do you know if the federal agents who were directly around Pretti during the time of the shooting are still out on the street in Twin Cities or anywhere else in Minnesota? Any of them?
Don't know.
Don't know. They don't talk to us. They don't tell us. They don't.
General Ellison, with the BCA being denied access to the scene after getting the warrant, is there recourse for them that way, or do you feel that this restraining order that you obtained requiring the federal government to preserve evidence is that recourse?
So there are certain legal strategy decisions that I'm not at liberty to just go on about in a meeting like this one. What I can tell you is that both the warrant and the TRO are evidence of our resolve. And we are going to get to the truth of what happened to Mr. Alex Pretti and to the truth of what happened to Renee Good. And that's what we're pledging. And we're going to use every legal means to do that. So I can't tell you, I'm not at liberty to tell you what you're asking me, but I am here to assure the public and who's listening that we are going to get to the truth of this matter, and we won't be deterred and we won't be denied.
Just a quick one for Jameson. We did see BCA agents at the shooting scene this morning. Can you confirm what they were doing there?
Absolutely. The question is about whether or not the BCA agents were on the scene of the shooting this morning, and they were continuing to collect evidence that they've seen. They were also doing some canvassing of the neighborhoods. I don't want to get into any more of the investigative process in this, but at the BCA, we are going to continue to investigate this shooting based on whatever evidence we're able to get, and we appreciate the Attorney General assisting us with the temporary restraining order to make sure that the federal government is retaining evidence that will be available, we would assume, to us at a later time. But the investigation will not pause. We are continuing to work on anything and everything that we possibly can.
I'm just going to close. I'm going to close with one thing that I promised the parents with Michael and Susan, and I speak to all Americans on this over these last 24 hours. What you saw, you're now knowing more about this young man, beloved by his family, accomplished ICU nurse, skillful in ability to work with veterans, someone who's beloved by community, no criminal record, lawful firearms owner. And you know what you saw. And then you heard the most powerful people in the world, certainly in this country, President, Vice President, Greg Bovino, Kristi Noem, narrate to you what you were looking at, that this was a domestic terrorist, crazed, running at law enforcement with the intent to kill massive numbers of them, sullying his name within minutes of this event happening, and then closing the crime scene, sweeping away the evidence, defying a court order, and not allowing anyone to look at it. I don't care if you are conservative and you are flying a Donald Trump flag, you're a libertarian, don't tread on me, you're a democratic socialist of America. This is an inflection point, America. If we cannot all agree that the smearing of an American citizen and besmirching everything they stood for and asking us not to believe what we saw, I don't know what else to tell you. This has to be the moment your government Here in Minnesota, I've made it clear, I'm accountable for things that happen here, and I will take responsibility for that. Someone has to be accountable. Someone has to hold the final decision on this. And sitting behind a keyboard at 2 a.m. and besmirching a VA nurse and a son and a coworker and a friend is despicable beyond all description. This is not, we need to see both sides. This is not, we need to wait for this. This is basic human decency. And at this point in time, I'm just asking, try for a moment to set aside the political side of it and go back and ground in the humanity of this. This family has gone through enough, and to have the most powerful man in the world drag their dead son with absolutely no evidence and gaslight the entire country, this is enough. And I would say, President Trump, you can end this today. Pull these folks back. Do humane, focused, effective immigration control. You've got the support of all of us to do that. Let our law enforcement continue to do what they do, making Minnesota one of the safest states in the country, one of the best places to live. Allow our children to go back to school. We have got children in Minnesota hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota. And there's one person who can end this now. And I'll go back to it again. Please show some decency, pull these folks out, reset this situation, and allow us to do the job that the Attorney General, myself, were elected to do, protect the people of Minnesota and carry out the laws of Minnesota. We'll be back with you when we get more information.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Catherine Richert in studio right now. We're just wrapping up listening to a press conference there, a little over 35 minutes or so, with Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison talking about Saturday morning's fatal shooting of Alex Pretti. Governor Walz started the conversation talking about Alex Pretti and who he was. He ended talking about the conversation again that he had with his parents. And there was a lot of talk about the lawsuit and the various things that have come forward in the last 24 hours. Catherine Richert, what stood out to you that we've learned from this press conference that's just wrapped up?
Yeah, I think the headline today, at least, is that a federal judge has granted a temporary restraining order that would basically bar federal officials from destroying any evidence that was collected at the scene yesterday. And of course, this is in response to a lawsuit that was filed Saturday night by Hennepin County Attorney's Office and also the BCA. And I just to remind our audience here, we were told yesterday by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension that officers from the unit were blocked from the scene where Alex Pretti was shot. That is despite the fact that they had a search warrant permitting them to be there and to collect evidence. BCA Superintendent Drew Evans said yesterday that this was unprecedented. And let's just remind the audience, too, this is actually the third time the BCA has been blocked from accessing the scene and getting evidence. Of course, the first time being the fatal shooting of Renee Macklin Good on January 7th, and then again with a separate non-fatal incident on January 14th. So yes, that restraining order has been granted, and Ellison said, he has no reason to think that there would be any defiance of it. That's not something they've experienced yet.
Yeah, and you heard Attorney General Keith Ellison there talking about the BCA arrived. They were refused access. They got a judicial warrant and, again, were refused access. And this is, again, as they were saying, this is about blocking the destruction of evidence. And Clay, I just want to say, too, one thing that really stood out to me from what Ellison was saying was that they've never had to seek a temporary restraining order in a situation like this. I mean, we use the word unprecedented a lot right now, but again, this has never happened. He said it was granted within 2 hours after asking, and this quote stood out to me too. He said, "The fact that anyone would think a federal agent would think to destroy evidence was really unthinkable a few weeks ago." Yeah, and you also heard Governor Tim Walz there talking about how this is no longer a political debate, was something he said, that this is more a moral debate. And again, I was saying that he started the press conference talking about Alex Pretti and ended it, but he also ended the press conference with another thing that we've become pretty used to the governor saying in these press conferences, is pleading with the president to, dial things down, get the ICE agents out of the state. And this just is becoming a common call from the governor.
Yeah. Another thing we heard once again, he asked Minnesotans to continue to protest peacefully.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard not to think about what's happening right now without thinking about what happened in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis in 2020. He seemed to suggest, too, that the eyes of the nation and really the world are on the state right now, and sort of using that as a way, leverage to get people to keep it calm.
Now, I believe right now we have Secretary of State Steve Simon, who is connected right now. I believe that is correct. Secretary Simon, are you there?
I am. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is kind of may have caught people by surprise that this news came up, but the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi issued a letter to the governor with 3 requests that she writes would restore the rule of law, support ICE officers, and bring an end to the chaos in Minnesota. The 3rd request in the letter was to allow the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice to access Minnesota's voter rolls. Secretary Simon, can you explain what it was like to get this and what this is asking for?
Well, I can tell you it was bizarre and disturbing. Bizarre because it has nothing to do with anything going on the ground. This wasn't a demand for anything related to immigration or public safety. Rather, and this is the disturbing part, it has to do with ongoing litigation. Just for your listeners' sake, several months ago, the Department of Justice already asked for the same private confidential voter data on Minnesotans. I'm talking Social Security numbers, driver's licenses, not just name and address. And they asked it of 42 states total. Only 10 states have said yes to that. The rest of us, 3/4 of the states, have said no, and the Justice Department is already suing us to try to get that data. Our position on that data is they are not entitled under the law to obtain that data. That's personal information. Our position starts and ends with the law. So to link ongoing litigation, we've got a hearing on this thing in a few weeks. It's going. It's not at a slow pace.
Yeah.
It's at a fast pace. This is actively being litigated in the courts. And to tie this somehow to the tragedy around us, to the bloodshed, to the violence, to the anguish that Minnesotans are going through is something I just can't explain. And so it's both bizarre and disturbing in that way.
Secretary Simon, this is Catherine Richard. You and I have talked many times now about this narrative that the 2020 election was stolen. Can you just tie this request to that broader narrative? I think for some people, like you just said, it felt like it came a little bit out of left field. What does this have to do with the current immigration enforcement effort on the ground? I mean, how do you see that?
Well, I don't know whether it is or isn't tied to the president's false, and I have to say delusional, claims that he 3 times won the state of Minnesota. I'm not concerned with the partisan preferences here. I'm just telling you what the facts say and what the election system produced: a clean, honest, fair, accurate system. It produced results that were not to the president's liking. That's neither here nor there, but those were solid numbers that you can take to the bank. 2020 was the most watched, scrutinized, litigated election in the history of the United States of America. And the courthouse doors are always wide open for anyone in any election to take their facts and evidence and testimony before a judge and dispute the results of an election. When the dust settled and that process was over, the result was undeniable. And to the extent, and I don't know if this motivated Attorney General Bondi or not, but if it did, that's sort of doubly tragic because it's being done in service to the president's false beliefs about the election system, not only in Minnesota, but nationwide.
Now, Secretary, I just want to hone in on this here. Does your office have to respond to this, or what do you plan to do in the days ahead?
Well, we did respond, I'd say, an hour or so ago, hour and a half ago, we came out with a pretty detailed statement responding to this. It won't surprise you that the answer to her request is no, we will not be producing that data, in part because it's in litigation, and our position in that litigation in the court proceedings has been crystal clear and very consistent, along with many other states, which is federal law and state law do not entitle them to this information. period. That's it. And we'll abide by whatever a court says. Maybe a court will say we're just wrong on the law, that our legal position is faulty or flawed. If so, we will happily turn over that data. But I have to tell you, of the 24 states, including Minnesota, that the Justice Department has already sued on this issue, they are 0-3. 3 courts have already summarily and quickly dismissed the Department of Justice's claim that they're entitled to this data: Georgia, Oregon, and California. And we are in a process right now. There's a hearing, I think, on March 3rd with a similar motion to dismiss that we have brought. So I don't want to necessarily litigate the case here on the radio, but I want to say it's an active litigation. And in a civilized country, that's how we settle these kinds of disputes. We don't duke it out. We don't send ransom notes to states hinting that we're going to restore order and sanity if you put up the white flag in ongoing litigation. That's not how we do things in this country. Call me old-fashioned, but we have a process for this, and that's what's going on right now. But to tie these issues together is what is really bizarre to me. The request, there were only 3 requests in her letter, and one of them was this, and it has nothing to do with public safety or immigration or anything on the ground. Why that is, I don't know.
All right. Secretary of State of the state of Minnesota, Steve Simon, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You are listening to live special coverage here on NPR News. I'm Clay Masters, joined in studio right now with my colleague Catherine Richert. Catherine, we just heard from the secretary there, clearing up a little bit of I don't know, I felt like kind of a little bit out of left field that we would be getting this news this morning. But I mean, as we're going to go here in a moment to the press conference that was also going on during Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison's press conference from Greg Bavino, who is with State's Border Patrol. But Catherine, anything that we should be thinking about as we move into this next press conference to listen to it about what we just heard from either the Secretary or from Governor Walz or Attorney General Ellison?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that I'm going to be listening for here is just how they are framing what happened yesterday. Yeah. Because, I think one thing that you and I both noticed right out of the gate is that yesterday the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, called Alex Pretti, who was the person who was killed, a domestic terrorist. Federal officials said he wanted to, quote, massacre law enforcement. But, of course, videos of that shooting really conflict with that account. Right. So that there seems to be some dispute here.
Yeah. And according to Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara, Pretti was an intensive care nurse and U.S. citizen with no criminal record. Federal officials have said he was armed, but we have not seen footage that shows he pulled his weapon. I want to say that again. We have not seen footage that shows he pulled his weapon or that agents knew he had one until after agents had him held down on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and in fact, there's video footage that appears to show an agent had already removed Pretti's gun when 2 other agents opened fire and shot him, at least 10 times. So, and of course, and we have to point out, too, that Chief O'Hara did say Pretti had a legal permit to carry a firearm.
And now I believe we are going to go to that press conference with U.S. Border Control Greg Bavino that happened just around the same time that the governor was speaking.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Bavino, Commander. Good afternoon. My name is Greg Bavino, Commander at Large for CBP Assets here in Minneapolis. I'd like to take a few moments here before we take questions and before we hear from my colleague, Mr. Marcos Charles, to talk about a subject that I think is very important given the events over the past couple of days. And that topic is the topic of choices. Choices. Now, choosing or making a choice is one of the only true freedoms that any of us really have, is to make a choice. Whether that's the choice to be here today as the media, the choice to go to school, join the military, join law enforcement. Making a choice is a freedom that resides within us. Now, good choices are important in life, as we all know. And many actions that take place are due to our choices. The choice to, say, cross the border illegally, that is a choice that someone makes. To cross the border illegally, that's a choice. The choice not to utilize the CBP Home app, that's a choice. not standing in line and doing it the right way, that is a choice. And there are always actions that result from our choices. When you choose to use your 5-year-old child as a shield to evade law enforcement, that is a choice that someone makes. And there are actions and consequences that result from that choice. Or when you're a politician or a community leader, you make a lot of choices there, some very important, wide-ranging, and in-depth choices. When, as a politician, if you choose collusion and corruption as a choice, then there are consequences and actions that take place because of that. That's one reason the U.S. Border Patrol and ICE are here in Minneapolis by the thousands, is because of those choices. When politicians, community leaders, and some journalists engage in that heated rhetoric we keep talking about, when they make the choice to vilify law enforcement, calling law enforcement names like Gestapo, or using the term kidnapping, that is a choice that is made. There are actions and consequences that come from those choices. And then when you choose, when someone chooses to listen to a politician, a so-called journalist, a community leader that spouted that type of vilification towards law enforcement or anything else, when you choose to listen to that, that is a choice, and there are consequences and actions there also. I think we saw that yesterday. And those actions and choices can obviously have tragic consequences, bad outcomes, outcomes that law enforcement never wants to see. Law enforcement never wants to see a bad consequence due to a poor choice. Now, these choices have reverberations throughout society. Let's take a look at, go ahead and put that on the screen, please. Yesterday, Border Patrol agents were engaged in a targeted law enforcement effort to apprehend this individual here, Mr. Jose Huerta Chuma. Look at his criminal record: domestic assault, intentional infliction of bodily harm, disorderly conduct. He's also got some other records there as well. This individual remains at large today. This individual is still roaming the streets today. This is the individual on that targeted law enforcement efforts that Border Patrol agents were engaged in yesterday when they were disrupted, assaulted, and prevented from conducting that Title VIII mission by individuals intent on making the choice to riot, to create anarchy, and to be a violent mob. This individual walks the streets today because of those choices made by politicians and those perhaps weaker-minded constituents that chose to follow directions of those politicians. Sad state of affairs. Now, enforcing the law is not a choice. I choose to be a Border Patrol agent. Mr. Marcos Charles chooses to be an ICE agent, but enforcing the law, that's not a choice, that is a duty. As we all know, those laws were enacted by Congress, signed by the executive, and upheld most of the time by the judiciary. Those are the laws of our land. That is our duty to enforce those laws, whether that's a Title VIII immigration law, whether that's chasing a bank robber or a spy or whatever else. That is our duty, whether it's a state and local law enforcement agency, and they make choices also. Do they support federal law enforcement going after Mr. Jose Huerta Chuma, or do they not? We all make choices. Our Title VIII immigration mission continues. Next slide. Our Title VIII immigration mission continues unabated here in Minneapolis, despite yesterday's tragedy that was preventable by folks making better choices, politicians, journalists, and would-be anarchists and rioters. This individual from Laos was apprehended within the past 24 hours. This operation continues unabated. This is evidence of that. We will continue to make these streets a safer place. It is our duty, because we choose to be Border Patrol agents and ICE agents, to take individuals like that off the streets so we can make Minneapolis and America a safer place. Thank you.
Was in federal immigration
Hold on
custody.
questions until the end. Mr. Marcos Charles will talk, and we'll take questions at the end, ma'am. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I know Commander Bovino spoke about yesterday's incident and situation, but I also want to draw your attention to the continued uptick in violence we're seeing against federal law enforcement officials, not just here, but across the country. Yesterday, here in Minneapolis, a crowd of violent agitators tackled an ICE special agent when one of our special response teams went to assist. A protester literally bit off part of that agent's finger. The officer received immediate medical attention on the scene and was transported to the emergency room for treatment. We do want to thank the people at the hospital for the assistance and the staff who treated our officer. The officer is recovering, but is now permanently maimed and has lost part of his finger. I don't think I have to tell you that this kind of violence is unacceptable, but I also don't think I need to tell you that this kind of violence is not a coincidence. When sanctuary politicians, activists, and the media work hard to create chaos and fear instead of using their platforms to reassure their communities, this is the result. The reality is, and this is what Commander Bovino and I have been talking about all week, we're out here to arrest dangerous criminal illegal aliens so they can't victimize innocent people in our communities anymore. Since the beginning of this operation, we've arrested over 3,400 illegal aliens, removing criminals, gang members, and terrorists out of Minnesota communities, detaining them in ICE custody for removal from the country. Those are criminals who won't reoffend in our communities. Those are criminals who won't be creating more victims that could be one of your family members or loved ones. Some of these criminals that we arrested yesterday are on the scene, well, these are our agitators from yesterday, if anybody wants to take a picture of these people or haven't seen them yet. The first picture was the individual who decided to bite off one of our agents' fingers. Some of the criminals we arrested yesterday: 40-year-old criminal illegal alien from Honduras convicted of assault. A 51-year-old criminal illegal alien from Laos convicted of assault also. A 45-year-old criminal illegal alien from the Ukraine convicted of first-degree robbery. And a 46-year-old criminal illegal alien from Laos who was convicted of facilitating child sex crime. ICE officers and agents are out there every day arresting the worst of the worst so law-abiding citizens in this country and in Minnesota can sleep easy at night. This work isn't about headlines, it's about public safety. We can now take some questions.
Commander Rubino. He was previously in federal immigration custody in 2018 at a jail in Minnesota, and then was released under the Trump administration again in 2018. You talk about choice. That was also a choice to release this individual, the man that you were targeting, obviously, to detain him. So if he was released in 2018 from some federal immigration custody, why would that be the case? Why was that choice made?
Yeah, I don't know the particular case in 2018 that you're talking about, but this individual that you want to put that back up there, please? That individual is now an illegal alien. It's my mission to find this illegal alien before he harms another American citizen and does harm. That's what I'm after there. And yet we can go back and look and blame in history. Right now, my mission is to take this individual off the street. And the main point here being is this individual is in the process of being taken into custody agitators, rioters, and anarchists prevented us from taking this individual into custody because of a very, very chaotic scene. This individual should be in custody right now, not out on the streets preying on Americans. That is the story that is most poignant here.
Multiple videos from different angles of the shooting from yesterday, and at no point is he seen brandishing.
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
We have seen multiple videos from the incident yesterday from different angles, and at no point do we see Alex Pretti brandishing a weapon. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem said that he was brandishing a weapon, and in the video we see him on the ground with his hands on his head. We see an officer leaving what it appears to be with the weapon after he extracted it from Pretti's waist area. Did the officers see the weapon? Did they see him brandishing the weapon at him?
Sure. Many videos out there, many different accounts that you may see, that I may see, that anybody here may see. That, folks, is why we have something called an investigation, to take what you're talking about, to take those videos, to take witness statements, to take officer statements, all those minute details that will paint a true picture, not a freeze frame concept, and paint a larger picture of what really happened. That is why we investigate, so we can get to the truth, so there's not speculation. Speculation after 24 hours, you've got a lot of speculation in there. That officer, let's think of what those agents were doing on that scene, making a split-second decision. You've had 24 hours to try and armchair quarterback things. That agent had a split second to make a decision.
Commander Rubino, between your agency, Commander
It's not speculation.
Who's next?
And then right here.
Commander, was Alex Pretti armed when he was shot?
Again, the investigation is going to uncover all those facts, things like how many shots were fired, where were the weapons located. All those facts are going to come out in the investigation. I wasn't there wrestling that assaultive subject that was assaulting Border Patrol agents. I wasn't there wrestling him myself, so I'm not going to speculate. I'm going to wait for that investigation to come. No, don't interrupt me. I'm going to wait till that investigation comes out until I make a decision there.
If there's an investigation going on and you have not concluded, isn't it possible this was a bad shooting? Or have you already concluded for yourself that this was justified?
I've not concluded anything. I've not given you a conclusion. But what I do know,
it's a bad shooting.
what I do know is this individual was on that scene several minutes before that shooting, interfering with a lawful, legal, ethical law enforcement operation to arrest Jose Huerta Chuma. And again, it's back to choices. We just talked about choices. When someone makes the choice to come into an active law enforcement scene, interfere, obstruct, delay, or assault law enforcement officers, and they bring a weapon to do that, that is a choice that individual made.
No,
Commander Bovino, when it comes to the shooting, from what I understand, there were 2 agents who fired shots. We know one of the agents had 8 years experience, and we know he was a less lethal instructor and had this training. What did the other agent, what was his history, and are they both working right now, or are they on administrative leave?
All agents that were involved in that scene are working, not in Minneapolis, but in other locations. That's for their safety. There's this thing called doxing, and the safety of our employees is very important to us. So we're going to keep those employees safe. As far as the number of shots, the number of agents involved, that, again, is going to come out in the investigation. I'm not going to speculate on who did what, when they did it, how they did it, or what exactly occurred there. I'm going to wait for the investigation to let me know
say that one
what
of
happened.
them did have 8 years experience, so we are talking about one of the agents. Why
Yes.
not talk about the other who shot as well?
Because before those facts come out, we need to ensure that we're talking truthfully and accurately. And before I speculate, I'm going to talk truthfully and accurately.
Between your agency, Border Patrol, and Mr. Charles, your agency, ICE, we've now seen 2 separate people shot and killed by your officers within 17 days. Do either of you plan on taking any accountability for those actions?
2 suspects, or you're correct, 2 suspects have been shot and suspects that assault, delay, obstruct, or threaten a law enforcement officer's life. It goes back to the choices that we just talked about. When individuals make poor choices, poor decisions, come into a law enforcement situation, an active law enforcement situation, conspire to come into that situation, whether that's based on ideology, we don't know. That'll be in the investigation that we just talked about. That's what we base the split-second decisions on, and our law enforcement officers are safe. They managed, they managed to come home at the end of shift. And, again, I would implore upon any individuals, whether they're anarchists, rioters, or anyone else that thinks it wise to go into a law enforcement scene to disrupt, to delay, is to don't do that. Let's think about that in terms, say a bank robbery is in progress and the police are taking care of that, and then you decide to go in there and perhaps take action. That's not a good idea in any form or fashion. The same thing with Title VIII, same thing with Title VIII enforcement. We are after an individual with a very serious criminal record. We don't need any help. Thank you.
Commander,
and also with Marcus Charles with Immigration and Customs and Enforcement. So this was a press conference that was going on at the same time that Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison were giving a press conference. We brought you that press conference live, and now we're just catching up on what was happening there as well. So, Catherine, what stands out to you from that press conference earlier last hour with Greg Bovino?
Well, he was asked some questions by the media that get at this dispute we've seen between the federal government and state and local officials about what actually happened yesterday morning. He was asked specifically whether his officers saw Alex Pretti, who was shot yesterday by Border Control, brandish a weapon. This seems to be a key question, right? Bovino kind of dodged the question. He didn't really answer it. He said there are many accounts out there. That's why we have this ongoing investigation. But of course, I need to note that this investigation is being conducted by the Department of Homeland Security of its own officers. So basically investigating itself.
And we heard from Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison that they had to, basically sue to make sure that federal evidence would not be Destroyed.
Yeah. Right.
Let's go back to hear a little bit from Governor Tim Walz. This was him about an hour ago during that press conference.
This is an inflection point, America. If we cannot all agree that the smearing of an American citizen and besmirching everything they stood for and asking us not to believe what we saw, I don't know what else to tell you.
So that's how Governor Tim Walz wrapped up the press conference just a little bit in the last hour. Attorney General Keith Ellison was just talking about just how unprecedented of a case this is.
I can tell you that it was a polite meeting. I can also tell you.
So this was a conversation. Can we pause that for just a moment? We'll take this again. I had the wrong clip up there. So that Attorney General Keith Ellison was commenting on his meeting with the Vice President. So that happened earlier last week when Vice President Vance was here on Thursday, I believe. He met with the Vice President. And, there's been this tension between the federal government and with the governor's office and the Attorney General about, dialing down the rhetoric, getting immigration custom enforcement out of the state. And so this came from a question that was asked to the Attorney General about his meeting with the Vice President. Okay, we'll go to that clip now.
I can tell you that it was a polite meeting. I can also tell you that I walked out of there thinking that we probably weren't going to get anywhere. Because quite honestly, a few hours late, not even hours, a few minutes later, he just got up there and just articulated the same talking points he made to me in the meeting. I tried to correct him. He didn't want to hear that. And so I'm like, well, welcome to Minnesota. Thank you very much. You both of us have things to do. So see you later. And I left. It was cordial enough, but it was not fruitful. But look, I just think that, and I'm sure the governor agrees. If you can try to talk to somebody sensibly, we do. But that one didn't get where we had hoped.
Okay, so that was the Attorney General Keith Ellison talking about his meeting last week with Vice President J.D. Vance. Because, I mean, we see these like dueling press conferences very regularly where fingers are pointed and the rhetoric just keeps leveling up. Catherine, it doesn't sound like anything's going forward behind the scenes anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is something we've seen time and time again, really, for a while, but certainly becoming more regular with the shooting of Renee Macklin Good on January 7th by an ICE officer. It just feels like kind of the same story playing out over and over again. You have local officials saying, we've seen some video footage of that. Here's what we saw. And then you have the federal government saying, no, that's actually not what happened. And again, I just want to remind our audience here that yesterday we heard from Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, who called Alex Pretti, who was shot, a domestic terrorist. Federal officials said he wanted to, quote, massacre law enforcement, but videos of that shooting conflict with that account.
Yeah, and according to Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara, Pretti was an intensive care nurse and U.S. citizen with no criminal record. Federal officials say he was armed, but we have not seen footage that shows he pulled his weapon. I just, again, want to make that clear. We have not seen footage that shows he pulled his weapon or that agents knew he had one until after agents had him held down on the sidewalk.
Right. In fact, video footage appears to show that the agent had already removed Pretti's gun when those other agents opened fire. Bovino was asked about this, too, at the press conference. He was asked, was Pretti armed when he was shot? And Bovino went back to the thing he had said earlier, which is that this investigation is going to uncover those facts, where the weapons were located, et cetera. Now, again, that investigation is being done by the Department of Homeland Security, which is effectively investigating its own staff.
That's right. And again, if you're just joining us, we have been listening to a couple press conferences that happened in the last hour about Alex Pretti, the 37-year-old victim who was killed yesterday morning. We first heard the live press conference with Attorney General Keith Ellison and Governor Tim Walz talking about the lawsuit that they've put forward to make sure that evidence is not destroyed from the federal officials. And again, we're talking about at the beginning of that press conference, I'm getting ahead of myself. Then we heard from Greg Bovino, the head of U.S. Border Control. So at the beginning of that press conference, Governor Tim Walz talked about the meeting that he had with Alex Pretti's parents. I mean, at the end of the day, this is what we're talking about. A U.S. citizen, a Minnesotan. He was fatally shot by a U.S. Border Patrol agent yesterday morning. The shooting took place near 26th Street and Nicollet Avenue in Minneapolis. Pretti was an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital. The Department of Homeland Security claims Pretti was armed and resisted. Local officials confirm he had a legal permit to carry, and video shows no indication that Pretti brandished the weapon. I'm Clay Masters alongside colleague Catherine Richert. As we're kind of winding down our conversation here and going back to normal programming here in a little bit, what else is kind of sticking out to you right now as we wind down this coverage this hour?
Yeah, well, I think this is a little buried in that first press conference with Governor Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison. But Ellison reminded the audience that he is going to be in court arguing tomorrow for a restraining order against Operation Metro Surge, which is what they're calling this increased law enforcement.
Started in early December.
Yep, exactly. That lawsuit was filed a few weeks ago. Tomorrow's the first hearing. So we'll be watching that, of course, here at NPR News. And again, just kind of seeing where things go after this judge granted a temporary restraining order that would bar federal officials from destroying any evidence or altering evidence related to the shooting, which, of course, is relevant to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension's own efforts to investigate all of this.
Yeah, and I think we can, last night after his death, there were vigils that were across the Twin Cities, a very large presence in Minneapolis. You could drive down the street, even in St. Paul, and see people with candles on the side of the road. There were other suburbs where they joined in on it. And I believe now we're going to hear a little bit from someone who was at one of those vigils.
The last couple of weeks, couple of months, we hear the phrase like, we keep us safe. And that's become... That's not an abstract. That's not in theory anymore. We literally are the ones keeping us safe. We have neighbors that are delivering groceries, that are watching for federal agents, that are giving rides to work, to school. So it's all of us right now keeping each other safe because no one else is doing it Our police aren't doing it. The federal government isn't doing it. Nobody's doing it. It's us. We're what we have. And so this is a showing of that we're all in this together. You know, even in the darkest circumstances, there's light. And the light for me is seeing tens of thousands of people, ordinary people, just meeting the moment with whatever they have, whatever capacity they have, if it's, you know, shopping or donating or just lending of themselves. Like, we're all in this together. And seeing all of these people out here and at the march yesterday and at every organization across the city, that gives me hope. I know we're going to get through this as a city and as a nation. It's just really hard right now. And so doing hard things with community is what makes it possible.
All right, we were just listening to Todd Schumann. That was at a gathering in the Fulton neighborhood of South Minneapolis yesterday. Many people across the Twin Cities gathered in parks and on street corners for candlelight vigils to remember Alex Pretti. You've been listening to live special coverage here on NPR News. Catherine Richard is in studio with me. Anything else that you feel is important to bring up as we're going to throw things back to the normally scheduled programming?
Well, you know, I mean, we had Secretary of State Steve Simon on earlier today weighing in on this request from Attorney General Pam Bondi, who wants to see our voter rolls here in Minnesota. And of course, he said that the answer to that is simply no. I think we'll be watching that pretty closely going forward, too.
All right. This is wrapping up our special coverage here on NPR News.
Support comes from the Walker Arts Center, presenting L'Addition. Performance duo Bert and Nassie use physical comedy and radical miming to expose the nonsensical cycles and structures that govern our world. February 5th to 7th. More at walkerart.org.
Support comes from Theater Latte Da's production of The Glass Menagerie, Tennessee Williams' story of family, longing, and desire. Performed as the playwright intended with musical underscoring. February 4th through March 1st. Info and tickets at latteda.org.